Be here today with Dr. Eddy Portnoy, who is the senior researcher and the exhibition curator at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research in New York City, a contributing editor at the Forward and Tablet magazine. He's the author of the book Bad Rabbi and Other Strange but True Stories from the Yiddish Press, published in 2017 by Stanford University Press. Eddy, thanks for taking time to talk.
Thanks for having me.
So you are yes?
No, I was going to say, I don't want to consider you among the bad rabbis.
Thank you.
You're one of the good ones.
One of your areas of expertise is in Jewish popular culture, looking at sports and theater and press and beyond. And so there's a phenomenon that I'd like to look at and learn about from you on Jewish psychics and clairvoyants. So I guess to start historically, how is the Jewish tradition related to such a phenomenon?
So traditionally, it's not permitted. In Dvarim Yudches, Deuteronomy, it says explicitly that Jews are not to act as or consort with wizards, witches, enchanters. They're especially not to engage in necromancy, which is contacting the dead. In fact, if you do that, if you're caught doing that, penalty is that you get the death penalty. Mm-hmm. You're put to death. Mm-hmm. So if you want to speak to the dead, you have to be dead.
Yeah, right.
So it says explicitly that you're not permitted to engage in these activities. It's very anti-Harry Potterish. Mm-hmm. No wizards, no witches. They're against that stuff. However, there is always a component of Jewish law that certain Jews don't abide by. And this is one of them. And obviously not all Jews engage in this sort of thing, but from, ancient times until today, you have Jews who either work as psychics and clairvoyants or who go to them. Obviously you have far more who go to them, who use their services. But in my own work, I've discovered all kinds of activities on the part of Jewish psychics. And the sort of sweet spot of my historical period is from the 1880s up until about World War II. But, one example of a text that I found is it's called Chochmas Ayad or Chochmat Ayad. It's a palm reading manual. It's in Yiddish and Hebrew. It was published in 1799, and it is actually a reprint of a manuscript that was published in something like the 16th century. Mm. And so these things have been going on forever, and this is a manual that explains how to read palms and how to tell people's futures.
Wow.
By doing this.
Yeah, so interesting. So what sort of extrasensory activities do we see Jews participating in?
So there's a wide array of them,
yeah.
And I can talk about certain psychics and clairvoyants who have been pretty active. One of them is a man by the name of Naftali Hertz Imber. It's a name you may recognize. I'll get to that in a bit as to why. But he was born in a shtetl called Zlochew, which is now in Poland, and he was brought up in a Hasidic family. He was known to be a Talmudic prodigy. He left home in his late teens. He went to Palestine in the early 1880s. He became the secretary for an English Lord Oliphant, and he eventually made his way to the United States in the 1890s. Once in the United States, he began to work as a professional clairvoyant. He called himself the Mahatma. He would dress in white robes and travel around the country making predictions. And some of his predictions are pretty interesting. So he, in 1896, and this is the prediction that sort of cemented his popularity and reputation as a good psychic. In 1896, he warned people to stay away from Paris because something terrible was going to happen there. And about 2 months after he made this prediction, a huge fire broke out in Paris. It burned many city blocks and hundreds of people were killed. And so, this was just one of the things he claimed. He also, another one of his predictions was that he said that and this was in, I think, 1898, he said that a state of Jews will be born of violence in the land of Israel. He also said that in the future, people will get power. People will power their homes using light from the sun. And this is in the 1890s. This is really, pretty good, pretty good predictions.
Yeah.
He also claimed that California wines would become some of the best in the world. He was also an alcoholic, so he loved drinking, and he had no choice. He was a drunk,
right?
And so but these predictions they came true. He also made a number of predictions that weren't accurate.
Right.
One of the interesting things is that when I first began researching this about 10 years ago, he claimed that in 2010 a new civil war would break out in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first read that 10 years ago, I thought that's a wrong prediction. That's crazy. But in today's current climate, it's not that crazy.
Yeah.
So Naftali Hertz Imber is actually a relatively famous guy. There have been a number of biographies written about him.
Mm-hmm.
None of those biographies have any information about him working as a psychic, because I think that people were embarrassed by this.
Yeah.
He is best known as the author of Hatikva.
Mm.
He wrote the poem that became the Israeli national anthem.
Oh, wow.
And so this is what he's best known for.
So who are the types of Jews, 20th, 19th century, who want to participate in such activity? Is it more secular? Is it more religious?
It's everyone.
Yeah.
It's everyone. So just another example, in New York in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, there was a very popular psychic by the name of Professor Abraham Hochman. And he had a house on Rivington Street in the Lower East Side. And it was well known that one of his specialties was finding missing husbands, runaway husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, according to the newspapers, every day outside of his apartment, there were women lined up outside his stoop, waiting for him to open so he could help them find, their missing husbands. So these were, just sort of average Jews on the Lower East Side who, needed help solving some kind of problem.
Yeah.
It could have been a missing husband, it could have been a missing child, it could have been, they needed a job. There are all kinds of reasons why people go to psychics. They want to know what's going to be, and if this person, if they perceive this person as helping them, they're willing to pay, and they pay and they go. They're also, and it was the Lower East Side was littered with the Jewish psychics. I don't know if you've ever been to the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. But it's this fantastic museum in the Lower East Side that, shows what life was like in a tenement in the early 20th century. Yeah. When they were excavating their building on the Lower East Side, they found flyers for a psychic, a woman by the name of Dora Meltzer, who was just a local psychic who lived in the building.
Right.
And it was, a relatively common thing.
Yeah.
As far as, religious people go, you always had Balei Shem, people who were writing amulets,
right.
This kind of thing, crosses the line into traditional Jewish life.
Right.
There was in Poland in the 1930s, there was a rabbi by the name of Ephraim Blitman, who was known as the clairvoyant rabbi. And he, in the press, almost every year, he makes predictions. Like most psychics, he gets about half of them right.
And what about some of these New Age Kabbalists today who are making a lot of money? Is this something they're engaging with as well?
You know what? That I don't know. I don't know if, Kabbalah is part of this.
Yeah.
But I don't know if contemporary psychics are, or contemporary Kabbalists are claiming to be able to tell the future.
Okay. And for those who don't believe in this stuff or completely reject it, how can they understand the value of what someone is paying for here?
Well, people see themselves as getting a service.
Yeah.
If it provides them with a kind of knowledge, it may or may not be accurate. It provides them with a kind of confidence, and this is the reason that people go to these purveyors of these people with psychic abilities or clairvoyance. They feel like they can provide them with something that they're not able to do on their own.
Yeah.
And so it's also fun.
Yeah,
It's fascinating. It's if you can go to a person who has first of all claims to have special insight into you, and they're actually able to pull something out that's surprising. That's really engaging. That's that's really amazing. It may just be pure luck. It probably is. But
okay, so last question, I think. What are some examples of how the nature of what people want to know is tied to the zeitgeist of the time? Like, can you think of different eras and what type of future clarity people are craving and how that's connected to current events?
I mean, everyone would love to be able to tell the future. That's, you'd love, people would love to be able to, know what the, next great, IPO is or what bet they can make on, on what horse or anything like that.
So there's a financial motive.
There's frequently a financial motive. That's a big part of this. Abraham Hochman, the man that I mentioned before on the Lower East Side, he was also well known for being good at picking horses at the track. He may have had some sort of inside information. It's not really clear. But people are constantly dream about being able to sort of reach into the future and know what's going to happen. It gives you a jump. On reality. Is that real life? No. But people would like that.
So you did your doctorate at JTS, and I think of something Heschel would write about is that the prophetic experience was less about future telling, or it was intended to be, and was intended to be a channel between people and God. To represent God to the people, represent people to God, and kind of distancing this role of like future prediction. And I wonder, like, what would you say is like the moral or religious case against wanting to know the future?
Well, I'm not sure if there's. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if there's. That's almost like a moot question because you can't really know the future. But as far as as being able to have a moral case, I don't. That's interesting. People always say that. I mean, this doesn't really have to do with the future, but people always say that if they could go back in time, they would kill Hitler. It's like it's one of these fantasies that if you could do it, you would you? And how would that alter the course of history? The same thing sort of exists, I guess, for the future in a theoretical sense. If you knew your future, would you follow that path? What if that? What if the future that you were offered, wasn't necessarily that good? Would you alter it? How would that change everything else? So it's sort of one of these theoretical questions that's almost impossible to answer. Dives into the realm of fantasy. And that's really, in a way, what a lot of science fiction is about.
Fascinating stuff. So if you haven't read Bad Rabbi, make sure to pick it up. And we've got 2 more lectures, recordings coming out with Dr. Eddy Portnoy later today.